Hey everybody, how y'all doing today? Welcome back to D-Ray's Shop. As you can see, I've got my old shop truck in here. It's my 2007 Chevrolet 2500 HD Silverado Classic with the 6-liter gas burner engine in it. And I was driving that thing up the driveway the other day, and it just shut off on me. No warning lights, no buzzer, no nothing. It just died. And the truck's got a little over 100,000 miles on it, so I've been kind of highly suspect of the fuel pump because that's a pretty common failure on these trucks with that kind of miles on it. So after I popped the hood and checked the fuel pump relay, found everything was good there. One way you can tell if your fuel pump's working is just simply to listen, turn the key on, you should hear the fuel pump cycle for about 3 seconds, then shut back off. Well, I wasn't hearing that. So one of the old tricks I've been told is I actually got under the truck with a plastic mallet, got on the bottom of the fuel tank, gave it a couple of whacks with the hammer, got back inside, turned the key on, then I heard the fuel pump cycle. When it hit the ignition, she fired up. So that tells me that's a sure sign that the fuel pump's failing. So there's a couple of different ways that we can get at that fuel pump, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to do it. And so let's get started. Now our fuel pump is going to be located actually inside the fuel tank itself. Now the fuel tank is going to be located just in front of the rear axle, and it's going to be just inside of the frame rail on the driver's side. Now, since the fuel pump is mounted in top of the tank, there's a couple different ways we can get at this. Either we can remove the fuel tank, which if you're kind of like me, if you don't have the right tools to do that with, and especially mine is about full of fuel, so it's going to be kind of heavy and kind of cumbersome, so that's not really recommended, especially if you risk the chance of spilling gasoline all over the floor and causing a fire hazard. So our next option is to actually remove the bed, which is the most common practice. Now there again, since I'm doing this by myself, being able to remove the entire bed and set it aside to access the fuel pump is not very practical. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what's called a tilt bed method. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove all the hardware attaching the bed to the frame, with the exception of the hardware on the passenger side. All that hardware down that side, I'm just going to back the bolts off but leave them in place, and that'll kind of hold the bed in place on the frame. Then I'm simply going to tilt the bed up enough to where I can gain access to the top of the fuel tank. Then we're going to get in there and see if we can get that fuel pump out. There's going to be 4 bolts down each side of the bed that holds it to the chassis. 2 on the front is going to be on the outside of the frame rail. The 2 on the back is going to be on the inside of the frame rail. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all 4 bolts here on the driver's side. The 4 bolts down the passenger side, I'm going to back them off about halfway, but I'm going to leave them in place. We're going to use those as kind of like a hinge so we can pivot the bed up and gain access to the fuel pump. I'm going to show you a little closer detail on the mounting hardware on this bed. Now the first bolt's up here in the front. You got a mounting bracket that comes off of the frame, goes to that little cross member on the front of the bed. Now you can't see the head of the bolt, but it's just inside that recess right there. Now you move on back a little bit. Your second bolt is going to be right there. That's easy to get at. Then our other 2 bolts are going to be on the inside of the frame. Now I'm going to crawl under the truck and give you a better shot of them, but one of them is going to be approximately right there on that cross member, and then one back there on the rear cross member down at the very edge of the frame. So I'm going to slide under the truck and give you a little closer shot of those. Now from underneath the truck, as we follow the frame on back, you got a hole in the bottom of the frame right there, and then right there is your number 3 bolt. All right, then we'll slide on down the frame a little bit further, and I'll show you that last bolt. Now as we come on back here to where you see your receiver hitch mounting bracket, if you look up there at the very tail end of the frame right there, you see that last bolt, and you also notice that there's a hole in the bottom of the frame and on the receiver hitch bracket to allow you to have access to it. That's going to be the same on both sides. Now, first thing you want to do is remove the tailgate. Now the way this thing comes off is your cables just have little quick disconnects right here on each end. We'll disconnect both of those. Then you've got 2 pockets over here. There's one over here on the driver's side. Now this little pocket here is solid. Now the one over here on the passenger side has got a little slot cut in the back of it back there. Now what you do is when you get your cables disconnected, we'll partially raise up the tailgate a little bit until that slot aligns with that mounting tab. Then we'll pick it up off that one, set it down on the bumper, then we'll scoot the tailgate over just a little bit, then we'll be able to set it off of the truck. Also, there's a couple of tail light connections that you're going to want to disconnect. It's just in front of the rear bumper on the driver's side. There's a junction box right there. You can just follow your wires from your tail lights, just disconnect those, and then we'll have all of our wire connections back here on the back end taken care of. One last thing we're going to remove before we start tilting this bed is going to be the fuel filler assembly. And what it's held on with is a plastic rivet down here on the bottom side. Let's pull that out. And then it's got two T27 screws up here on the top side. Okay, now I'm ready to raise up the bed. Now what I've got here is I've got me about a 16-inch long 2x4. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pick this up. I'm going to wedge this between the frame and the bottom of the bed right toward the back end of the inner fender well. Now what I want to do when I'm picking this up, I'm not going to lift very much on the front end of it, because since the arrangement of the bolts on the outside of the chassis up in the front and on the inside of the chassis on the back, when you go to tilt those up, it's going to kind of bring the bed up a little bit of an angle, and if you lift on the front end of it very much, it's actually going to cause the front end of the lower part of the bed to contact the back side of the cab. So I'm going to try to lift as much as I can on the back end of it. We're going to wedge this under the back end of it, and it actually gives us access to the fuel tank. So let's give it a try. All right, nothing to it. Let's take a little closer look under the bed here. Now you can see what I've done here is I've added some extra blocks for safety. And let's take another close look at the mounting hardware from the inside here. You can see it a little bit better now. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. Now there's your front mounting bolt there. Of course, there's our second mounting bolt. Note those are on the outside of the frame. Then we're going to move them down the frame rail toward the back. There's your third mounting bolt right there. You notice it goes right through the top of the frame, and you have to access it from the inside. And then lastly, down there at the very end of the frame, there's our fourth bolt. Those are the ones we're using for a hinge to hold that bed in place. Also, now you can see the fuel pump. That's what we're after right there. Now I've already cleaned this up just a little bit. The top of this tank wasn't very bad, just had a little bit of accumulation of dirt and dust and a little bit of grime and stuff. So I just took a soft brush and compressed air, blew that out real good, because you don't want to have a lot of dirt in there when you take that fuel pump out, or you're going to get a lot of dirt in the tank. Now had this truck been used off-road a lot, had a lot of accumulation of mud and things on it, I probably would have rolled it outside and hit it lightly with a pressure washer. But that looks pretty good there, so let's work on getting that pump out of there.